The Rich Man's Secret, a life lesson about becoming rich. Many people think being rich is about luck. Some think rich people were born with money. Others believe you need a perfect education, powerful connections, or a genius mind. But the truth is often much simpler. This is a story about a young man named Adam. Arthur grew up in a small and quiet town where life was never easy. The roads were old, the houses looked tired, and most people worked every single day only to survive. Dreams seemed small in that place because many people believed life would never truly change for them. Arthur lived with his parents in a tiny house at the edge of town.
When winter arrived, cold air entered through the cracks in the windows, and during rainy days, water slowly dropped from the roof into old buckets placed around the house. His father worked long hours in a factory, leaving home before sunrise and returning after sunset with tired eyes and rough hands. His mother cleaned homes for wealthier families and sometimes stayed awake late at night sewing clothes just to earn a little extra money. Even though they worked hard, there never seemed to be enough money. Some weeks were better than others, but many times the family worried about paying bills or buying enough food. Arthur watched his parents struggle every day, and although he loved them deeply, he often asked himself a question that never seemed to leave his mind.
Why do some people stay poor while others become rich? He did not ask this question because he hated rich people. In fact, he admired them. He wanted to understand what they knew that poor people did not. Every morning on his way to school, Arthur passed a large and beautiful house that stood proudly at the end of the street, like something from another world. It belonged to an old man named Mr. Whitmore, one of the richest men in town. The house had a large garden filled with flowers, tall trees, and workers who carefully cleaned every corner. Expensive cars stood quietly in the driveway, shining under the morning sun. Arthur slowed down every time he walked past the gate. He often imagined what life must feel like inside such a place.
Did rich people ever worry about money? Did they ever feel afraid of tomorrow? One morning, while staring through the gate, Arthur quietly whispered to himself, "I wonder what it feels like to live like that." Suddenly, a calm voice behind him answered, "Money does not always bring happiness, young man." Arthur quickly turned around and froze in surprise. Standing there was Mr. Whitmore himself, wearing simple clothes and carrying a cup of tea. He did not look proud or arrogant like Arthur expected rich people to look. Instead, he looked calm, wise, and strangely kind. Arthur felt embarrassed and immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, sir," he said nervously. "I wasn't trying to bother anyone." Mr. Whitmore smiled gently and shook his head. "You seem curious," he said. Arthur looked down for a moment before finally nodding. "I just wonder how people become rich," he admitted honestly. The old man studied him carefully for a few seconds before asking, "Do you want the easy answer or the real answer?" Arthur thought about the question carefully. Something about the old man's voice made him feel this moment mattered. Finally, he answered, "The real answer." A small smile appeared on Mr. Whitmore's face. "Good," he said. "Most people only want easy answers." Then he turned and slowly walked back toward his house. Before disappearing inside, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Come back tomorrow morning." That night, Arthur could barely sleep. His mind was filled with questions. Why would a rich man want to speak with someone like him? Was this some kind of joke? What exactly did he mean by the real answer? Early the next morning, Arthur hurried to Mr. Whitmore's house. The old man was sitting peacefully in the garden, drinking tea, as if he had been expecting him all along. He pointed to an empty chair and said simply, "Sit." Arthur obeyed quietly. Mr. Whitmore looked at him for a moment, and then asked, "You want to know how rich people become rich?" Arthur nodded quickly. "Yes," he answered. The old man leaned back in his chair and said something Arthur would never forget. "Then forget what movies teach you."
Forget luck. Forget magic. Becoming rich begins in the mind. Arthur frowned slightly because he did not fully understand. "What does that mean?" he asked. Mr. Whitmore smiled patiently. "Poor thinking creates poor results," he explained. Arthur immediately thought about his hard-working father and said quietly, "But my father works harder than anyone I know, and we are still poor." The old man nodded slowly. "Hard work matters," he said. "But working hard without learning is like running in circles. You stay busy, but you never move forward." Arthur sat silently, listening more carefully than ever before. Mr. Whitmore continued, "Most people spend their entire lives working for money, but rich people learn how money works. That is the difference." Arthur leaned forward. "So what should I do?" he asked eagerly. The old man stood up, disappeared into the house, and returned holding 3 books. He placed them carefully on the table. "Read," he said simply. Arthur looked disappointed for a moment. He had expected some secret formula, some hidden trick or magical advice. Instead, he was given books. One was about successful habits, another about business, and the last about the way successful people think. Seeing the disappointment on Arthur's face, Mr. Whitmore laughed softly. "You wanted a secret?" he asked. Arthur nodded slightly. The old man smiled and said, "This is the secret. Most people are too impatient to follow it." Arthur took the books home and started reading that same evening. It was difficult at first. Some words were hard to understand, and sometimes he wanted to stop. While other children played outside, Arthur stayed inside, reading page after page. Whenever he felt tired, he remembered something Mr. Whitmore had said. Poor people chase entertainment. Rich people chase education. Those words stayed inside Arthur's heart, like a quiet voice, pushing him forward. Days slowly became weeks, and weeks turned into months. Arthur visited Mr. Whitmore nearly every day after school. The old man taught him lessons about discipline, patience, money, failure, and success. One cold morning, Mr. Whitmore handed Arthur a broom and said, "Today you will clean my garden." Arthur looked confused. "You mean work?" he asked. "Yes," Mr. Whitmore replied calmly. Arthur spent hours cleaning leaves and organising tools. At the end of the day, Mr. Whitmore handed him $5. Arthur smiled proudly, feeling rewarded for his effort. But then something strange happened. The old man stretched out his hand and said, "Now, give it back." Arthur stared at him in shock. "What?" he asked. "Give it back," the old man repeated calmly. Arthur felt frustration rise inside him. "But I worked for this," he protested. Mr. Whitmore nodded. "Exactly," he replied. "And that is why I want to teach you something important. If you only work for money, money controls your life. But if you learn first, one day money will work for you." Arthur did not completely understand those words at the time, but he trusted the old man enough to keep listening. As time passed, he slowly changed. Instead of complaining about life, he focused on improving himself. Instead of wasting hours doing nothing, he built better habits. He woke up early, studied every day, and learned skills while others laughed at him. Some of his friends mocked him. "You think books will make you rich," they joked. Arthur sometimes felt hurt, but he remembered another lesson Mr. Whitmore had taught him. Never take advice from people living the life you do not want.
So he stayed quiet and continued moving forward. At 19 years old, Arthur finally believed he was ready to change his life. After years of saving small amounts of money, he decided to open a small furniture business. He worked day and night creating handmade tables and chairs, believing people would love his work. He invested almost everything he had into the business. Opening day arrived, and Arthur waited nervously for customers to walk through the door. But nobody came. Days passed, then weeks, and still the shop remained mostly empty. Arthur began to feel fear growing inside him. Bills started piling up, and slowly all his savings disappeared. One painful afternoon, Arthur sat alone in his empty shop, staring at the furniture he could not sell. He felt ashamed, disappointed, and deeply frustrated. After all those years of learning and trying, he had still failed.
That evening, he visited Mr. Whitmore with sadness written across his face. "I'm done," Arthur said quietly. The old man looked at him calmly. "Done?" he asked. "Yes," Arthur replied bitterly. "I failed." Mr. Whitmore shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You only fail when you stop." Arthur felt anger rise inside him. "But I lost everything," he argued. The old man leaned forward and asked softly, "Tell me, what did you learn?" Arthur frowned in confusion. "Learn?" he repeated. "Yes," said Mr. Whitmore. "What did this experience teach you?" Arthur stayed quiet for a moment before finally answering. "I learned that people did not want my products," he admitted. "Good," said the old man. "What else?" Arthur sighed. "I spent money badly. I didn't understand customers." Mr. Whitmore smiled proudly. "Excellent," he said. "You are learning." Arthur looked confused. The old man leaned closer and said words that changed Arthur forever. "Failure is education. Most successful people fail more times than ordinary people even try." For the first time in weeks, Arthur felt hope return. Maybe failure was not the end. Maybe failure was only a teacher. And perhaps, just perhaps, this difficult moment was the beginning of something far greater than he could yet imagine. Arthur walked home that evening with mixed emotions inside his heart. Part of him still felt disappointed, and another part of him felt strangely hopeful. The failure of his furniture business had hurt him deeply. He had invested his money, time, energy, and dreams into something he believed would finally change his life. Yet now he had almost nothing left. Still, Mr. Whitmore's words repeated again and again inside his mind like a quiet voice refusing to disappear. Failure is education. Most successful people fail more times than ordinary people even try. Arthur did not fully understand how losing everything could somehow help him become successful, but he trusted the old man more than he trusted his own fears.
That night, instead of feeling sorry for himself, Arthur sat at his small desk, opened an old notebook, and began writing down every mistake he had made in the business. He wrote for hours. He realized he had focused only on making products he liked instead of understanding what customers actually needed. He had spent too much money too quickly. He had assumed hard work alone would guarantee success. By the time he finished writing, he noticed something surprising. Although he still felt disappointed, he no longer felt defeated. The following weeks were difficult. Arthur had little money left and he needed work immediately. He found a job at a local store carrying heavy boxes and organizing shelves. The pay was small, but Arthur accepted it with gratitude. This time, however, he looked at work differently. Before meeting Mr. Whitmore, Arthur believed jobs existed only to pay bills. Now he treated every workplace like a classroom. Instead of simply doing his tasks, he carefully observed people. he noticed which products customers bought quickly and which stayed on shelves for months. He listened to customer complaints. He watched how managers made decisions. While his co-workers complained about long hours and low salaries, Arthur quietly studied everything around him. One evening, after work, Mr. Whitmore asked him an important question. "Tell me," the old man said while pouring tea into 2 cups, "what is the difference between poor people and rich people?" Arthur thought carefully before answering. "Rich people have more money," he said. Mr. Whitmore smiled softly and shook his head. "That is the result," he replied, "but not the difference." Arthur looked confused. The old man leaned back in his chair and said, "The biggest difference is how they think about time." Arthur frowned. "Time?" he asked. "Yes," said Mr. Whitmore. "Poor people often trade all their time for money. Rich people learn how to make time work for them." Seeing Arthur's confusion, he continued, "Imagine 2 men. One works every hour of every day and stops earning money the moment he rests. The other builds something that continues earning, even while he sleeps. Which man becomes free?" Arthur immediately understood. "The second man," he answered quietly. Mr. Whitmore nodded. "Exactly. Never spend your whole life selling every hour you own." That lesson stayed with Arthur. He continued working at the store during the day, but at night he studied business, communication, and human psychology. He spent less money than ever before. While others bought expensive clothes to impress people, Arthur wore simple things and saved every extra dollar. His friends often laughed at him. Some bought new phones and fashionable items they could barely afford. They teased Arthur for being too serious. "Enjoy life," they said. "You're young." Arthur smiled politely, but deep inside he remembered something else Mr. Whitmore had taught him. Many people spend money trying to look rich while staying poor inside. Months passed, and Arthur slowly saved money again. One afternoon, while working at the store, he noticed something interesting. Customers frequently complained that certain household items were too expensive and poor quality. Instead of ignoring the complaints, Arthur became curious. He spent weeks researching suppliers and products. Slowly, an idea formed in his mind. What if he started a small business selling affordable, useful household products people genuinely needed? This time, Arthur moved carefully. He remembered the pain of failing his furniture business, and he refused to repeat the same mistakes. Instead of spending all his money immediately, he started very small. He sold only a few products at first. He listened carefully to customer feedback. When people complained, he improved. When people liked something, he offered more of it. Unlike before, Arthur no longer believed success would happen quickly. He understood now that building something meaningful required patience. At first, progress was painfully slow. Some weeks brought little profit, and many nights Arthur felt exhausted after balancing his job and business together. There were moments when fear returned. Sometimes he stared at his small savings account and worried he would fail again. During one particularly difficult evening, Arthur visited Mr. Whitmore, feeling discouraged. "Maybe I'm not meant for this," he admitted quietly. "Maybe some people are simply born lucky." The old man looked disappointed. "Luck?" he repeated. Then he pointed outside toward a tree growing in the garden. "Do you see that tree?" Arthur nodded. "Tell me," Mr. Whitmore continued, "how long did it take to grow?" Arthur shrugged. "Years, I suppose." "Exactly," the old man replied. "And what would happen if someone watered it for 1 week and then quit because nothing changed?" Arthur lowered his eyes. "The tree would never grow." Mr. Whitmore smiled gently. "That is what most people do with success. They want results too quickly. They give up just before life begins rewarding their effort." Arthur left feeling stronger.
From then on, he focused less on immediate results and more on consistent improvement. Every single day, he tried to become just a little better. He improved customer service. He learned negotiation skills. He practiced speaking confidently. He read books while eating lunch. Slowly, his business began growing. A few customers became regular customers. Then they recommended him to others. Within a year, Arthur was earning more money than he had ever imagined possible.
Yet something unexpected happened. Even after earning more money, Arthur noticed he was not automatically happier. One evening, he confessed this feeling to Mr. Whitmore. "I thought having more money would solve everything," Arthur admitted, "but I still worry sometimes." The old man smiled knowingly. "Money solves money problems," he said calmly, "but it does not solve problems inside your heart." Arthur listened carefully. "Many people become rich but remain miserable," Mr. Whitmore continued. "Never confuse wealth with peace." Those words surprised Arthur. For years he believed money was the answer to everything, but now he began seeing life differently. He noticed wealthy people who constantly stressed about status, competition, and appearances. He also noticed poor people who smiled more than anyone else. Slowly, Arthur understood an important truth. Money mattered, but it could never replace character, health, love, or purpose.
Despite this realization, Arthur remained ambitious. He wanted freedom for himself and security for his parents. After years of struggling, he dreamed of giving them a better life. So he continued learning and growing his business carefully. He hired a small team and treated employees kindly because he never forgot what struggle felt like. While many business owners shouted at workers, Arthur respected them. He listened to their ideas and helped them improve. Employees worked harder for him because they trusted him. Several years passed, and Arthur's business expanded beyond his small town. He moved into a larger office, travelled for meetings, and slowly became known as a successful businessman. Newspapers occasionally mentioned his name. People who once laughed at him suddenly admired him. Old friends who had mocked his habits now asked for advice. Some even pretended they had always believed in him. One afternoon, Arthur visited his childhood neighbourhood and stood quietly outside the tiny house where he grew up. The roof still leaked when it rained. The paint had faded even more, yet seeing it filled him with emotion instead of sadness.
He remembered cold winters, worried parents, and nights when hope felt impossible. Standing there, he whispered quietly to himself, "This place taught me everything." Soon after, Arthur bought his parents a beautiful home. When he handed them the keys, his mother began crying immediately. His father stood speechless, unable to believe what he was seeing. "You don't have to struggle anymore," Arthur said softly. His father looked at him with tears in his eyes. "How did you do this?" he asked quietly. Arthur smiled and thought of Mr. Whitmore. "I stopped waiting for life to change," he answered, "and I changed myself first." Years later, Mr. Whitmore became very old and weak. One cold afternoon, Arthur received a message asking him to visit immediately. He rushed to the old man's house and found him resting quietly near the fireplace. The once strong mentor looked fragile now, but his eyes still held wisdom.
"I was wondering when you'd arrive," Mr. Whitmore said softly. Arthur sat beside him. "You don't look well," he said sadly. The old man smiled. "Life eventually asks all of us to rest." For a while, they sat quietly. Then Arthur finally asked the question he had wanted to ask for years. "What was the real secret?" he asked softly. "The secret to becoming rich?" Mr. Whitmore smiled gently. "I already told you." Arthur frowned slightly. The old man continued. People think becoming rich is about money, but real wealth begins long before money arrives. Arthur stayed silent. Real wealth, Mr. Whitmore said slowly, starts with discipline when no one is watching. It grows through patience when results are invisible. It becomes stronger through failure, responsibility, and learning. Most people want success without becoming the kind of person who can handle success. Arthur felt emotion rise inside him. The old man looked directly at him. You became rich because you changed your mind first. A long silence filled the room. Then Mr. Whitmore added something Arthur would never forget. Money is like water. If your hands are weak, it slips away. But if your character is strong, you can hold it. Not long after that day, Mr. Whitmore passed away peacefully. Arthur felt deeply heartbroken. Losing the man who changed his life felt like losing family. During the funeral, many wealthy people arrived, speaking about Mr. Whitmore's business success. But Arthur knew something they did not. The old man's greatest success was not money, it was wisdom. Months after his death, Arthur discovered a letter left behind for him. With shaking hands, he opened it. Inside, Mr. Whitmore had written, Dear Arthur, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. But remember something important. Never become arrogant. Never forget where you started. Money changes people only when people forget who they are. Continue learning. Continue helping others. Teach people what you learned, because true wealth means creating hope for someone else. And remember this final lesson. The richest person in the room is not always the one with the most money. Sometimes it is the one with the most peace. Arthur read the letter several times, tears falling quietly onto the page. From that day forward, he decided to do something bigger than building businesses. He started teaching young people about discipline, patience, habits, money, and personal growth. He helped struggling families. He gave opportunities to people who only needed someone to believe in them. Whenever someone asked him the secret to becoming rich, he always smiled before answering. First, he would say, stop chasing money. People often looked confused. Then Arthur would continue, become valuable, learn, grow, improve yourself every day. Money follows people who solve problems, stay disciplined, and refuse to quit. As the years passed, Arthur became richer than he had ever dreamed possible. But strangely, the thing he valued most was not his house, cars, or success. It was the life lessons he had learned along the way. Because deep inside, Arthur finally understood something many people never learn. Being poor taught him hunger. Failure taught him wisdom. Patience taught him strength. Discipline taught him freedom. And gratitude taught him peace. In the end, Arthur realized that the greatest secret about becoming rich was not simply earning money. The real secret was becoming the kind of person who could create success, survive failure, stay humble, and still sleep peacefully at night. Because money can change your life, but wisdom can change your future forever.